We live in a country of extraordinary beauty. It's part of what makes our quality of living so wonderful. A clean environment helps us lead healthy lives, as it will for our children and their children. But our environmental legacy is not likely to be such a pretty picture if we continue improperly disposing of used packaging, especially our plastic and steel containers and the residue left in them. Just as this is our worst nightmare, it is also our wake-up call.
Hi, I'm Bob Strasser from National Packaging Services. We are all grappling with these environmental issues in one way or another, but we and others in the container business are finding innovative ways to not just dispose of waste, but recycle steel and plastic containers and drums. It's sensible, it's responsible, and it's the law. We call it Closing the Loop.
Closing the Loop is a complete packaging program. It begins with supplying the new package, but also supports it with a comprehensive and ecologically sound disposal network, thus complying with your cradle-to-grave responsibilities. In addition, responsibly educating, training, and certifying your personnel on proper container disposal management is what Closing the Loop is all about. In the case of these steel containers headed for recycling, they'll be back within days in the form of new steel bars, coils, or ingots. It's a cost-efficient way to comply with environmental regulations. And best of all, it will allow you peace of mind, because there's nothing that can come back to haunt you. The Environmental Protection Agency has guidelines for proper disposal. These are federal laws that you, as the generator of the used container, must follow. They require: 1. All drums or containers must be drip dry empty, often confused with the 1-inch rule. If more material may be poured out of a drum, it is not empty. Drums should be drip dry. 2. All locks, lids, and fittings be securely in place. 3. All labels must be on the drum or container as if it were full of the original contents. Once your containers are picked up, they will be individually inspected. If they still have more than the legal limit of raw material or are not properly prepared, they will be rejected, labeled, and placed in a salvage drum for return to the generator of the used container. And you, the generator, will be responsible for the containers which now, by EPA's definition in 40 CFR 261.7, is not empty. It is imperative to receive proper documentation when your drums are picked up. A numbered, dated, and signed empty drum certificate begins the paperwork trail. This is for your protection. If, say, one of your drums is dumped illegally, or in the event of any other sort of problem, a clear and concise system exists for tracking your containers. Once all drums are emptied, they are segregated before being sent out to their respective processing centers. In one trailer, steel containers. In another trailer, plastic. And over here go the steel drums. Let's start the recycling process for steel drums. The drum head is removed. The drums are incinerated in a drum furnace equipped with a wet scrubber. The wet scrubber removes the particles before they can be released into the air. These particles are then incinerated and turned into a non-hazardous ash. The drum is then grit blasted, generally relined, assembled, painted, and sent out to the customer, who can use the drum for products such as adhesives, coatings, paints, and other materials. The process for steel cans, pails, and small containers is a bit different. The steel is shredded before it goes into the furnace for incineration. The clean steel is then sent to the steel mills, where it is melted in high-temperature electric furnaces so it can be formed into new steel bars, ingots, or coils for reprocessing. And lastly, plastic containers. These containers are shredded before entering an aspirating machine which separates the residue from the clean polyethylene. The residue then drops into a fiber drum which is sent out for incineration. What is now clean plastic is melted down, pelletized, and then formed into new reground plastic pails for use for tars, coatings, paints, and other type of non-FDA approved packaging. A paperwork trail is imperative in documenting the proper disposal of your containers. Once each container is properly disposed of, you receive a certificate of drum disposal. It is supported by a disposal tracking network which will explain exactly how your containers were handled, whether they were destroyed or recycled. And you will have a record of exactly when they were processed, thus ending your cradle-to-grave responsibilities.
Historically, many of these containers and drums were either improperly disposed of or ended up in landfills. Well, those days are over. Landfill space is disappearing, and the laws are much tougher than they've been in the past. These recycling methods are designed for you. Closing the loop is the future. Cradle-to-grave compliance begins with proper container management, an accountable disposal tracking network, and the paperwork to prove it. We appreciate your attention and hope you've learned something about recycling steel and plastic packaging through closing the loop. And remember, it's about commitment. It's about safety and corporate environmental responsibility.